The New Living Translation is the best Bible translation for certain people in certain circumstances. I want to be very practical in this video about when I've been those people and when I've faced those circumstances. I'm going to stand here in Blackburn Gardens, my wife's flower farm in the beautiful Skagit Valley, and give 4 very real-life examples, passages where the New Living Translation helped me understand God's Word better than I did before. That's the point, right? And then 4 real-life examples of where I've used the NLT over other versions for very practical reasons. This is a very special video. People have been asking for this video for years. I've been planning it for years. And after it's all over, I have a few very special announcements about the channel. The 4 insights I'm about to give are all drawn from a recent listen I did through the NLT New Testament. First, in Philippians 2:13, the New Living Translation gave a new angle on a precious but kind of tricky passage. I was listening along in Philippians 2, and I hit that amazing passage in chapter 2, which discusses Christ's example of humility. The passage turns then to application. Here's the New Living Translation at verse 12. Dear friends, you always followed my instructions when I was with you, and now that I'm away, it's even more important. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. That's Philippians 2:12 through 13. It's that last sentence that jumped out at me. I learned it first, of course, in the King James Version, for it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. It's not very different in the English Standard Version either. I've read it many times in that version where it is, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Again, Philippians 2:12 through 13. I like the alliteration there, both to will and to work. That's memorable. And I personally see both the King James and the ESV as pretty understandable here. The New Living Translation is not clearing up something that was previously all muddy. It's only zeroing in on the way we say things rather than using biblical English. I've talked about biblical English before on this channel. It's what you get when you translate the Hebrew or Greek as literally as English will allow. I think there are good reasons for doing this sort of thing, not least the strong and valuable tradition that we call the Tyndale King James tradition that did this a lot. This practice has served the church well over the centuries. But the New Living Translation says this the way I would say it. And suddenly I felt I understood just a little bit more. He gives me the desire to do what pleases Him and the power to do it. Wow, I can't say that's 180 degrees, even 15 degrees off of what I already understood this to mean. But I felt like it was in my heart language. That's the way I would say it in English if I haven't made that clear. I would not use an infinitive in English the way Paul did in Greek. If you say, we ought to use whatever forms Paul used. If he used an infinitive in Greek, then so should we in English. If you say that, you won't last a line in any translation, including the King James, before you violate that rule. Translation simply does not work that way. You can't insist on the preservation of all forms, grammatical forms across languages. If you say, we ought to be literal whenever we can, so if English can bear an infinitive, we should use one. I think you're being much more reasonable. But then what counts as bearing? There's gray area there, room for different people to come to different judgments. And I like the judgment that the New Living Translation translators came to on this minor point in Philippians. I do feel like I was helped a bit to understand. Second, in Ephesians 6:10, the New Living Translation made me feel like I was reading a letter, because I was. This is so minor. I am not saying that this is major, but just listen to the ESV at Ephesians 6:10, where Paul starts to wrap up his letter by entering into his final major section on the armor of God, following which he gives his final greetings to the church at Ephesus. Here is the ESV. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But as I was listening to Ephesians in the New Living Translation, this verse actually hit me hard. A final word, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. That is the same verse, Ephesians 6:10 in the NLT. All that tiny little change at the beginning did was remind me that I was reading a letter. That is all. And that is helpful because Ephesians is a letter from a person to people. Could I have gotten that from the word finally? Yes, absolutely. But, and this is subtle, finally sounds like something I would say in a talk. A final word sounds to me like something I would say in a letter. A formal letter, perhaps, an epistle, maybe, but a letter nonetheless. Now, my ear is not the only English ear there is. You may disagree, but I doubt you will, because no one disagrees on the internet. Third, in James 1:17, the New Living Translation interpreted a phrase I'd never really thought to interpret, a phrase that had become meaningless for me. Here's another place where going to the NLT brought me a little insight. This is a perfect example of what I have said over and over about the use of multiple Bible translations. Using them gets you out of Bible reading ruts. If you read multiple translations, you will be pleasantly shocked to realize how often you didn't really and truly think through, what does this phrase mean? This example comes from the very passage I arrived at in my Bible reading this morning, though now I'm actually reading through the King James for what it's worth. This is the way I memorized the passage as a young man. Here's the King James. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. This is what the New Living Translation says. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. Now, it isn't just the updated English that helps me understand here, though that does play a role. It's the attention that the NLT translators gave to one of those areas in which Greek is often less precise than English. And by that I mean genitive constructions. What is the Father of lights? I never really stopped to ask myself that while reading the King James. There are multiple possibilities with varying degrees of legitimacy. Maybe he's a father who's made of light, or he begat light, or he invented light. And what are the lights? The word is plural, but does it mean all lights or specific lights? The NLT picked a specific interpretation of this lights. God is our Father who created all lights in the heavens. That jumped out at me as I read. That just has to be the right interpretation. That's what James meant. But this never clicked with me. As I read more literal translations, I did not understand. Those literal translations are not wrong. And you can resent the mania for explanation that modern translations have. I borrow that phrase, poorly remembered, from an article I can't now find. I think it was in First Things by a Catholic writer, actually. But I just want to understand what I'm reading, and I can't bring myself to be upset when someone helps me. Fourth, in 1 John 2:15-17, the New Living Translation interpreted phrases that I had interpreted, and it reminded me of what I had studied. Here's the funny thing about world-making and life-altering texts like the Bible. The team that goes first often wins. Here's what I mean. The King James Version made it into my life first. And so its phrases are still the default for me. This is not bad. The King James Version, as I have repeatedly said on this channel, is an excellent translation. But because it's older, and because it's more formal, literal, and because I grew up with it, and its wording is familiar to me, I have repeatedly found that it's easy to let King James words wash over me, to kind of slosh past me, to come dripping into one ear and dribbling out the other. This is no criticism of the King James. This is what would have happened to me no matter what translation I grew up on. But it's hard to meditate on things that have left your mind, which is why I need to be shaken out of my Bible reading stupor so often. By all means, have a favorite translation. Hide God's words in your heart using specific words, actual renderings from an actual translation into your heart language. Meditate on these words, mull them over, chew on them. But I think you'll find that when you do that, due to human nature, some verses will be like the everlasting gobstoppers in Roald Dahl's children book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The taste will keep coming and coming. It will even increase. I feel this way about Psalm 51, for example, and so many phrases in the Sermon on the Mount. But reality for fallen and finite people is that as you keep chewing on certain words, some of them will be like gum that you kept in your mouth too long. They'll become tasteless. So what do? The great thing about gum is that when you pop in a new piece, the old gum becomes suddenly enlivened again. This is what happens to me when I read a less formal translation of the Bible. I pop a new piece of gum in my mouth, and suddenly the old piece and the new piece combine into one, and both taste refreshing. I become like 𝕻𝖎𝖏𝖘. I can chew and chew and chew until I'm going for the world record. I can stick the gum on the post of my bed at night and then wake up in the morning, grab that piece of gum, toss it back in my mouth, and keep on experiencing the joys. The Bible can be like Wonka's special gum, where the flavors change, going through all the courses of an excellent meal. Just listen to some key verses that I've tried to obey my entire life. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. That's 1 John 2, 15 through 17. I remember memorizing that on the way to church when I was a kid. Now listen to just one of those clauses in the NLT. This world is fading away, along with everything that people crave. I have thought about these verses and this phrase my entire life. I often think to myself of the words of John Newton in the hymn, Glorious Things of Thee Are Spoken. Fading are the worldling's treasures, all his vaunted pomp and show, solid joys and lasting pleasures, none but Zion's children know. Now, I might have mixed up treasures and pleasures, but I didn't check to make sure because the statement works either way. And its truth is drawn, surely at least in part, from 1 John 2, 15 through 17. The world is fading away along with everything that people crave. Indeed, what does it mean to say that the world's desires will pass away? It may mean that the people who are doing the desiring will all die, or it may mean that everything they desire will die, or maybe both. By not picking an interpretation, literal translations left me with a little less understanding. They did not do wrong. John wrote something that was slightly ambiguous, but I cannot believe that the New Living Translation translators did wrong to pick an interpretation, not when translation constantly requires this, and not when some passages just float too quickly through my mind if translators leave them ambiguous. All the same, this is a place where the New Living Translation translators may have forced the Bible to mean something more specific than the author meant, and so it is good to read the New Living Translation in conjunction with literal translations. I think many good readers will be able to notice this phenomenon if they are taught examples like the one I'm giving here. Okay, so these 4 little insights were awfully minor, but Bible insight is built from countless minor things that you notice while you read or listen. As I often say, only the Bible is worth this kind of obsessive attention to detail. And it's not that the details are right in the NLT and wrong in the ESV, or in the places that I've mentioned. It's that the details are just different enough for me to get some insight. That's what I want, and that's what the NLT delivers in my reading and study over the years. Beyond using the New Living Translation many times over the years during personal study, and I'm upsetting some birds. Oh, she's right there. I wish I could show you. I'm not so good at this filming stuff. It's so difficult to do on your own, but I'm close to a nest, so I'm gonna stand back, and hopefully that bird will not be alarmed so much. Okay, here I am. Is that okay, bird? All right, let's start this over. Beyond using the NLT many times during personal study over the years, as the most interpretive translation that I regularly check, I've used the NLT for very practical reasons. Here are the 4 examples that I promised. These will be a lot quicker than the last 4 examples from Scripture. First, I use the NLT for preaching to inner-city teens. The first time I remember turning to the NLT for teaching was when I was set to preach the gospel to a large group of inner-city teens. My church did an annual Cola Wars, which attracted 60 or so unchurched teens from the not-so-nice part of town. I served as a team captain every year for many years, I don't know, maybe 10? I also preached to the whole group on a number of occasions. And if you watch my channel, you know me. I want people to understand what God says when I preach. I also want people to realize, to know that what they're hearing comes from God. So I like to quote Scripture. Go figure. I also like to hold a physical Bible, even when it would be more convenient for me to read from my sermon manuscript. I don't honestly remember what verse it was that I was planning to reference. I actually checked my files to see if I could find this, but I failed. I recall that it was in Romans chapter 2. I'm going to guess that it was Romans 2:13. I'll just pick that one. I just couldn't bring myself to read words like these to these kids. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. That's the ESV, my favorite translation. That translation is not wrong. But isn't this just easier to understand for the audience that God gave me that night? For merely listening to the law doesn't make us right with God. It is obeying the law that makes us right in His sight. There is such a thing as a soft bigotry of low expectations. I acknowledge this. And people can rise up to scale hard words and sentences if given sufficient motivation and help. But these were lost kids in bad public schools who just wanted to get to snack time. The NLT was a great tool to reach them. Second, I used the NLT with one of my children who found the ESV hard. The thing is that my own 3 children vary in their interests and abilities, and when one of my children was young, that child indicated that the ESV was hard to read. So I gave that child a New Living Translation. I judged that the value of easier understanding was greater than the value to that child of encountering the same words in Bible reading over that child's lifetime. Third, I use the New Living Translation to make signs for my kids. My children are perfect. They never sin, they never fight, they never talk back. They never leave the milk out after breakfast or the door open or the cistern empty on a Saturday night. We never have trouble. But just in case we ever do, I made this sign on my laser cutter. I stuck the sign in the upstairs bathroom that the kids use to brush their teeth. Here are the verses drawn from the New Living Translation. Don't pick a fight without reason when no one has done you harm. That's Proverbs 3:30 in the NLT. It is foolish to belittle one's neighbor. A sensible person keeps quiet. That's Proverbs 11:12 in the NLT. Hatred stirs up quarrels, but love makes up for all offenses. That's Proverbs 10:12. No, quite obviously, if I have to make a sign like this, my children are not perfect. I wasn't perfect as a kid. I don't allow picking fights or belittling one's neighbor or stirring up quarrels. My wife and I give talks and consequences day after day after day, year after year. But these are sins that never quite seem to go away in our home. And I wanted the Bible to speak to my children with the blunt immediacy that their sin required. I didn't want them having Bibleese on that sign. I didn't want to give them a linguistic excuse to view the Bible as living in some kind of religious planet outside of our solar system. I wanted my kids to know that what they're doing when they have sinful fights is sin with a capital bad, that it's direct disobedience to God. And I judged that my children, living as children often do, right now and not in the past, needed to hear God's corrections of their sin in something as close to their own English as possible. Fourth, I used the NLT for a little note I wrote to my daughter. She likes to get little notes from me. Somehow she can hear me better sometimes when I write to her than when I speak to her. So I wrote her a little note using a pen that she and her mom had gotten for me at a local paper store. I told her I loved her, and I wanted to end the note by quoting the last verse, second to last verse, in Proverbs 31. I've known this verse my whole life. The ESV, which I'm going to read you first, actually, is hardly different from the King James. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I just wondered if my daughter would be able to hear these words. I have a mania for understanding, and I knew I wouldn't get a chance to explain in this note. To boast her about her a little, she's in the 99th percentile for reading ability. We just got her test results. But still, I just couldn't bring myself to use those words from the ESV, and I have the same problem that the NIV translator said they had in the 1960s. I find it very hard to think of a different way to say something when the King James is already in my mind at that place, so I looked to the NLT. It's not really that different from the ESV and King James, but it was just different enough that I felt it was right for the note for my daughter. Charm is deceptive, and beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. It's true that the NLT picked one interpretation of the famous Hebrew word used here, the one that shows up mere verses later in Ecclesiastes, the one that's often translated vain. That Hebrew word may be a little more complex than the New Living Translation makes it out to be in this rendering, but no translation can get everything across the divide between languages. I was comfortable with getting across the key element of vanity to my daughter. That is transitoriness, fleetingness, temporal limitation. Beauty does not last, it says right here. The New Living Translation helped me speak this truth to my precious daughter. I'm going to do a quick follow-up to this video next week where I dig into a couple more NLT passages in response to viewer questions. I end up defending the NLT, of course, but I used to despise it. I used to look down my nose at it. I used to think it was for weak Christians who couldn't be bothered to learn to read. In this opinion, I was wrong, with a capital bad. I still prefer a more literal translation for regular preaching ministry to middle-class educated, high school educated adults, but I'm so grateful for the New Living Translation. It is the best Bible translation for certain people in certain circumstances. Now it's time for some brief talk about the channel from my cherry tree. The short of it is that my courses are now free to all, but I ask those of you who have access, who've been paying for it, to consider supporting me anyway. I lost my job last year, and though my old boss at Logos tried to get me something there, it just didn't come through. I had a lot of conversations about full-time work with various schools and organizations, but for various reasons, some on their ends and some on mine, those just didn't work out. My wife and I feel called, for now, to remain in our town, in our church. But the very day I found out that in a specific number of months, a number I knew in advance, I was going to have no job and no pay, and still 3 children and a wife and a mortgage, I told my wife from the airport, this is my one chance to go out on my own. The best model I knew was that of my friend Reagan Rose, whose ministry, Redeeming Productivity, is really cool and really useful, something you should check out. He gave me access to his community for free just to see how things were run. It was very generous. He told me the numbers. And I decided that in 2025, I would try to do what Reagan was doing. I wanted to be a full-time YouTuber with church web design as a backup and stopgap. So I started a Discord server and worked very hard to release a course by February 1st, Bibliology for Beginners. I'm very grateful to those of you who supported me at the $25 a month level on YouTube and Patreon during that time and up till now, and those of you who've said kind things about my 2 courses. But the Discord server was a complete fail. My heart just wasn't in it, and you didn't seem to need or want it. I waited for people to ask questions, but almost none came. So I just started serving people in my YouTube comments again, about 50% of which are King James only. I'm shutting that Discord server down as of today, July 3rd, 2025. And I found that I really disliked a few things about keeping courses behind a paywall. For one thing, my heart is to give. I want to give Bible teaching if I possibly can. For another, it felt wrong for videos that I spent many hours on to get 38 views or 74 views. I want to serve more people. For another thing, people give to me, and they have given to me over the last several years to make my work pushing back against King James onlyism possible. I want to give back in the same spirit. I'm out of the debate on King James onlyism on my channel, unless somebody out there has the guts to debate me according to the terms I laid out. But I'm actually on to phase 2 of that debate in a big way. I'm showing what you replace King James onlyism with once it's removed from your heart and mind. Ideally, I think you should replace it with multiple versions are us. I'm trying to acquaint people with the embarrassment of riches that we have in English Bible translation. So, if you came here for my work on King James onlyism, I asked you to consider not leaving. Continue to support this work if the Lord so leads. I plan to continue making weekly videos and the occasional course. Now, you $25 a month supporters, you're paying my mortgage right now every month. I make my courses free now with some trepidation. I still need support from YouTube viewers if I'm going to keep doing this work here. But one major way that this support is happening is this. Pastors watch my channel and they reach out to me to design and host their church websites through my little business, Forward Design, that I've done for many years now. I'm pretty efficient with this work and I'm able to do it while continuing to teach Bible in a nerdy way on YouTube, and I love serving churches. Is your church website ugly and embarrassing? Talk to me. Are you paying GoDaddy or Bluehost to host your WordPress church site? Talk to me. Maybe I can match that price. two final little points. First, I did a course for Right Now Media that is now in production. We just shot it, me and a friend, last Friday. The top 10 Hebrew words every Christian should know. Might become a book too, we'll see. I'm allowed to release this course on my channel, but I'm not permitted to release it freely like I wish I could. I can only make it available to supporters. But I'm going to make it available to all supporters at whatever level, even the lowest level. Watch for more news on that in coming months. Second, I've taken two small sponsorships, Logos and SetApp. But in both cases, I was literally just about to advertise their products anyway when they happened to contact me with interest in a sponsorship deal. I intend to take sponsorships only under circumstances like those, which means rarely to probably never again. I've also received a tiny amount of free books and Bibles from publishers, but only when I've requested them, and I usually give them away if I don't want to keep them myself. And I requested them because I thought they would benefit you. If I'm sponsored in any way, I will say so every time. A huge thank you to all of you out there in YouTube land. This work has been among the most rewarding of my life. I love serving Christ's body. I love serving you. I pray I get to continue.